Hello there. Welcome back to Beyond Borders Careers. I uploaded a video yesterday where I talked about leaving Benghazi, Libya during the Arab Spring Revolution without a passport, with the airport being closed, and how I got home. It's a very interesting story, so here it is. Now, when I was in Libya, I was working for a company called AECOM. They're still around. And we had work visas that were issued by the Libyan government. And these work visas could not be issued in the country. You had to get them outside the country. And they were only good for 6 months. So after I'd been there 6 months, my visa was coming up for expiration. So me and 3 or 4 other guys who their visas were expiring about the same time, they bought us all plane tickets to Malta. And they had a whole arrangement with a travel agent in Malta. They would pick us up at the airport, take us to a hotel. They would take our passports from us. They handled the whole visa, soup to nuts. So that's what we did. And we'd have to hang out in Malta for like 2 or 3 days. I don't remember the exact amount of time. We basically just sit around and drink beer and ate good food there in Malta for a couple of days. And eventually our passports were done and we'd fly back to Tripoli. Well, once you got back to Libya, the the visa was not valid until it was stamped at a local police station. So the way that was handled logistically was our security manager, who happened to be British, he was from London, would meet us at the airport, and then one of his employees would take all the passports en masse over to a local police station. They would all get the required stamp. And then we constantly had people going back and forth by air between Benghazi and Tripoli. So that's what we all did. The ones that were from Benghazi, well, everybody turned in their passports, but I think there was only 2 of us that were going back to Benghazi. We didn't even leave the airport. We just got right back on a domestic flight heading over to Benghazi. Well, in this particular case, it was the second time doing it, so I'd actually been there close to a year by this point. I handed my passport, flew to Benghazi, and then a few days later, the shit hit the fan. The revolution started. There was pandemonium in the streets. There was gunfire going down right outside our apartment building. There were people being killed. There were bullets coming through our apartment building windows. So we weren't sure how we were going to get out. The airport was shut down. The police had pretty much abandoned their post. The military had left. It was bad. It was a bad situation. We were all nervous and very scared about the whole situation. But of everybody in our group, there was 11 of us, 11 Americans, living in this apartment building. And I was the only one without a passport. But I did have a Xerox copy of it. Not that that was going to do me much good. But anyway, after about a week, 10 days, something like that, we had some friends that were working, another engineering firm was working in a building right next to our apartments. They were Brazilians. They came over and told us one night, hey, we heard that the British Navy, the Royal Navy, is coming into Benghazi and they're going to take expats out and they're coming in tomorrow. So maybe you guys could get on, So we said, okay, we'll try it. So we made all plans. We had some drivers to take us over to the port the next morning. And so we went over, and I still wasn't sure what to do with my passport. So sure enough, we get to the port. I ran into some other Americans at the port that had nothing to do with us. They just happened to be there. And we were checking in with the British Navy. They had a little tent set up on the pier where they were taking people's temperature and seeing if you had any medical concerns and that sort of thing. And it finally got to the point where they were looking for documentation. And I had the Xerox copy of my passport is all I had. And they looked at it, passed it around and said, okay, well, I guess you're okay. We don't want to leave you here. So they let me on the ship. And we get on the ship. It was a British frigate called the HMS Cumberland. The sailors were very nice and friendly. They really accommodated us. They'd been out on deployment for a while, and this was like their last stop before heading home. And we left, by the time we got on the ship and the ship left port, it was already late in the afternoon that first day. And the seas were very rough. We sailed all night long and all day the next day and most of the night the next night. And it was about maybe 5, 6 in the morning that we docked in Malta. So I only had a small carry-on bag, so did everybody else. We get off the ship, it's still dark out, and we're walking down the pier, and all these embassies have little tables set up. There's the Canadian embassy, there's the Australian embassy, there's the Philippine embassy, there's the Brazilian embassy. They were all helping their citizens as they get off the ship with whatever they needed. There was no embassy of the United States table. They were not there. I don't know if they just didn't get the memo or what, but there was nobody there from the United States. So the other 10 people in my group, they all go through passport. We get to the building, they all go through passport control, and it's my turn, and I get up there. I hand him the piece of paper, and he just looks at it and says, well, what do you want me to do with this? This is not a passport. I said, yes, sorry, that's all I got. And he said, well, have a seat right there. He pointed to some chair. And I'm sitting there for, I don't know, maybe 45 minutes. And all of a sudden I see the same travel agent that worked with me when I was there a week or two before to get my visa. I recognized him. He was a Maltese guy, travel agent. And he comes in and he sees me and goes, why are you sitting here? And I said, well, I don't have a passport. This is my situation, And he goes up and speaks in Maltese to the official there. They spoke for 5 minutes, and all of a sudden they said, okay, you can go. I don't know what was said or what was determined, but I got to go through. Well, they loaded us all into a van, and we drive over to the Hilton Hotel right on the beach there in Malta. And it was early in the morning, the sun was up by this time, and they just handed me a room key. Said, here's your hotel room. There wasn't any check-in required. And we were all stressed out about what we'd just gone through. And they said, well, the bar's open and AECOM has a tab. So it's free drinks. Just go there and hang out, do whatever you want to do. We'll get back to you later. So I go up to the room. I call my family to let them know I'm okay. Take a shower. I think I got a beer out of the honor bar. Change clothes. I hadn't showered in a couple days, so I felt better. I said, okay, I'm gonna go down and meet everybody and have a drink. And that was pretty much it. That's more or less the end of the story, except it was maybe like 2 nights later. It was probably like 7 o'clock at night or something like that. And I was in the hotel room in my underwear, laying on the bed watching TV. And there was a knock at the door. And I look out the peephole and I see, okay, it's that same travel agent. I open the door and he says, "Hey, good evening. Sorry to bother you, but I got your passport." And what he had done, he himself personally had flown to London, met with our security manager, who had carried my passport himself to London, got my passport and flew back to Malta. I'm sure he billed AECOM for this service, but I was glad he did. So he got the passport and he handed me the passport and a plane ticket back home to Las Vegas. And he said, "Your flight's in the morning. So have a nice trip." And I said, "Well, thank you. That's it." And I think I had a flight to Frankfurt, and then from Frankfurt I flew, I think, direct to Las Vegas. And when I got to Las Vegas, my wife picked me up, and we drove home. And she was pulling in the driveway, I noticed a FedEx package at the front door. So when she pulled into the garage, and I got out and I walked through the house, went to the front door, opened up the door, got the package, opened it up. It was addressed to me, and it was my termination package from AECOM with my severance pay. So that was pretty much the end of the story. I got my passport, got home safely, and all was good. I just had to find another job now, and which I did. I did find another job rather quickly, so it wasn't that big of a deal. So I have more stories like that coming up in future videos, and if you want any particular stories about how to get a particular type of job abroad, I'll be happy to do a video on that too. Just please let me know. Also, please give me a thumbs up. And feel free to subscribe to the channel if you get any value whatsoever out of this. If not, I still appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Good day.